When you stop chasing and stop explaining, the comfort of your availability disappears, and reality finally lands. And I know that sounds almost backwards, because your heart believes love should be something you can communicate into existence. Your heart believes that if you just say it clearly enough, gently enough, intelligently enough, they will finally understand what they're risking. Your heart believes that your honesty should create closeness, and when it doesn't, you start blaming yourself. You start thinking, maybe I said it wrong, maybe I asked at the wrong time, maybe I was too emotional, too intense, too much. But listen, you can't talk someone into emotional capacity. You can't explain your way into being valued properly by someone who is still loyal to distance. Chasing is what happens when your nervous system panics. It's you trying to restore safety by restoring connection. It's you sending the extra message because silence feels like danger. It's you calling because you can't sit in uncertainty. It's you writing the long paragraph because you want clarity so badly you'll bleed for it. And explaining is the way you try to be understood, the way you try to make the relationship make sense, the way you try to give them a map to your heart. But in an avoidant dynamic, chasing and explaining can turn into something else. It becomes pressure in their body. Even if your words are kind, even if your intentions are pure, their nervous system hears, I need something from you. And the avoidant nervous system often responds by pulling away, because pulling away gives them relief. That's why chasing feels like love to you, but feels like threat to them. You're reaching for closeness, they're reaching for space. You're trying to build, they're trying to regulate. And the more you chase, the more they withdraw. Not because you're unlovable, but because your pursuit activates their fear. And then the cycle becomes cruel, because their withdrawal activates your fear, and your fear makes you chase harder. And suddenly the relationship is no longer about love, it's about regulation, you trying to regulate through connection, them trying to regulate through distance. The worst part is when you keep chasing, you accidentally make it easy for them to stay the same. Because your chasing becomes a safety net. It means they can pull away and still feel like the relationship is being carried. It means they can go quiet and still know you'll fill the silence. It means they can avoid accountability and still return to your warmth when they're ready. It means they don't have to face consequences because you keep softening the impact. And if there's one thing the nervous system loves, it's comfort. It doesn't care if the comfort is unhealthy. It cares if it's familiar. So your chasing, over time, trains the dynamic to repeat. This is why stopping is so powerful. Because when you stop chasing, you stop providing the comfort of your availability as something they can rely on without earning. When you stop explaining, you stop offering them the emotional labor of making the relationship make sense. You stop doing the work that should be mutual. You stop cushioning them from the consequences of their distance. And in that moment, reality lands, not as a dramatic explosion, but as a quiet weight. The quiet weight of, she's not fighting anymore. He's not pleading anymore. They're not trying to fix me anymore. They're not circling anymore. For an avoidant, that can be shocking, because they are used to distance being followed by your pursuit. They are used to you being the one who reopens the door. They are used to the connection surviving because you carry it. And when you stop, they don't just lose your messages, they lose the emotional guarantee. They lose the invisible safety net of knowing you'll stay emotionally available no matter what they do. And that's when the reality hits, not always immediately, but eventually, that their behavior has a cost. And I want you to understand this clearly. The point is not to create panic in them. The point is to create peace in you. Because the moment you stop chasing, your nervous system starts to learn a new lesson, that you can survive the silence without breaking yourself. You can survive not getting an answer. You can survive not fixing it. You can survive not being chosen by someone who cannot choose consistently. And that survival becomes strength. It becomes self-trust. It becomes the kind of calm that you can't fake, the calm of someone who finally understands, I don't need to chase what is meant for me. Stopping also reveals the truth. Because when you're chasing and explaining, you keep the relationship alive no matter how little they give. You keep giving them chances to do the bare minimum and still feel like they're participating. But when you stop, you see what happens without your effort. You see whether they step up or disappear. You see whether they value you or just value access to you. You see whether they want connection or just comfort. And that truth can hurt, but it's clean, and clean pain is better than confused pain. Confused pain keeps you stuck. Clean pain sets you free. Now, I know the fear that comes with stopping. The fear is, what if they never come back? What if my silence is interpreted as rejection? What if I lose them? And that fear is real, because you have been trained to believe that love requires effort. Constant effort, your effort. But here is the truth that will protect your heart. If someone can only stay when you chase, they were never truly staying. If someone can only be present when you beg, they were never truly present. If someone needs you to fight alone to keep the relationship alive, then the relationship is not love. It's you performing love for two people. So when you stop chasing and stop explaining, you are not giving up on love. You are giving up on self-abandonment. You are giving up on the role where you become smaller, quieter, easier just to keep someone from leaving. You are giving up on the habit of proving your worth through patience. You are stepping into a new identity, the identity of someone who can love deeply and still choose themselves. And if reality lands on them and they come back, you don't reward the old pattern. You don't hand them your heart because they sent a message. You don't let relief erase your standards. You require something different: consistency, accountability, communication, repair. You watch behavior over time. Because the goal isn't for them to chase you like crazy. The goal is for them to meet you with maturity, or for you to walk away with peace. And if they don't come back, then the most important thing still happens. You come back to yourself. You stop living in reaction. You stop living in suspense. You stop bleeding into someone's silence. And slowly, you remember what it feels like to be loved in a way that doesn't require you to chase it. When you set a boundary and actually enforce it, access to you becomes something they have to earn, not assume. And that single shift can feel like the moment you stop begging to be treated well and start requiring it. Because for so long, in an avoidant dynamic, you've been negotiating for basics. You've been negotiating for communication. You've been negotiating for consistency. You've been negotiating for respect. And the exhausting part is that you didn't even realize you were negotiating. You just thought you were being patient, understanding, loving, mature. But patience without boundaries becomes permission. Understanding without standards becomes self-erasure. Love without limits becomes a place where someone can take from you without ever learning how to hold you. A boundary is not a speech. A boundary is not a warning you give when you're emotional. A boundary is not a line you draw and then erase the moment you miss them. A boundary is a decision that becomes behavior, and that's why it has power. Because avoidance, and honestly many people, don't respond to what you say you deserve as much as they respond to what you are actually available for. Words can be negotiated, tears can be ignored, explanations can be dismissed, but behavior changes the environment. Behavior creates reality, and this is why enforcing the boundary matters more than announcing it. You can say, "I can't do inconsistency," but if you keep answering the late night message after 3 weeks of silence, inconsistency still has access. You can say, "I need communication," but if you keep smoothing things over after being stonewalled, lack of communication still gets rewarded. You can say, "I won't tolerate disappearing," but if every disappearance is followed by your forgiveness without repair, disappearing becomes normal. The boundary becomes real only when your actions match your words. And when they finally match, something deep changes in the dynamic, because you stop being predictable in the way that allowed them to stay avoidant. For an avoidant, assumed access is comforting. It means they can retreat without losing you. It means they can keep you in the background as emotional insurance. It means they can come close when they want warmth and disappear when intimacy demands responsibility. And if you keep being available, they don't have to grow, because the relationship continues on their terms. That's why enforcing boundaries can be the first time they truly feel the consequence of their pattern. Not because you are punishing them, but because you are no longer participating in what hurts you. And I want you to understand, consequence is not cruelty. Consequence is clarity. Consequence is the clean message that says, love does not get unlimited access to me without respect. Consequence is what separates a healthy bond from a cycle of emotional neglect. Because if your love is always accessible no matter how you're treated, then your love becomes cheap in the dynamic, not because you are cheap, but because access is unprotected. And protected access is what creates value. It tells the other person, this matters, handle it with care. This is why boundaries can suddenly make them chase. Because when access is no longer assumed, the avoidant nervous system can't rely on the old safety net. They can't disappear and return like nothing happened. They can't treat your presence like a constant. They start to feel the uncertainty that you used to carry. They start to realize that your patience has an end. They start to sense that they might actually lose you. And for a pattern built around control, losing assumed access feels like losing control, and that can wake them up. But here is the part you must hold in your heart. Boundaries are not a tool to make them chase. Boundaries are a tool to make you safe. If you enforce a boundary with the hidden goal of triggering them, you will still be trapped in outcome. You will still be waiting, watching, hoping, measuring. But if you enforce a boundary because you finally respect yourself, then whether they chase or not, you win. Because you stop abandoning yourself. You stop living in a relationship where your needs are always the thing being negotiated. Enforcing a boundary also changes you. It changes your nervous system. It teaches your body that you can protect yourself. It teaches your heart that you do not have to accept crumbs to avoid loneliness. It teaches you that discomfort is survivable, that missing someone is survivable, that not being chosen by someone who cannot choose consistently is survivable. And every time you enforce your boundary, your self-trust grows. Self-trust is the foundation of secure love, because you cannot feel secure with another person if you don't trust yourself to leave what hurts you. Now, let's make it real. Enforcing a boundary might look like this. It might look like not responding to a message that ignores everything that happened. It might look like saying, "I'm open to talking, but I'm not open to pretending nothing happened." It might look like requiring a conversation before reconnecting physically. It might look like not staying in a relationship where conflict is met with stonewalling. It might look like walking away when someone repeatedly withdraws instead of repairing. And yes, this might make them uncomfortable, because your boundary removes the comfort of avoidance. But discomfort is not abuse. Discomfort is often the price of growth. And if they respond to your boundary with anger, guilt, or blame, that tells you something important. It tells you they were benefiting from the lack of boundaries. It tells you they were comfortable in a dynamic where you carried the emotional labor. It tells you they want access without responsibility. And that information is not meant to break you, it's meant to free you, because you can't build a healthy relationship with someone who sees your self-respect as a threat. If they respond with accountability, that's different. Accountability sounds like, "I understand why you're doing this." Accountability sounds like, "I'm sorry for how I handled things." Accountability sounds like, "What do you need to feel safe?" Accountability shows up in consistency over time, not intensity for 2 days, and your boundary becomes the doorway to a new dynamic, a dynamic where connection is built through mutual effort, not through your sacrifice. So yes, when you set a boundary and actually enforce it, access to you becomes something they have to earn, not assume. And that is not a game, it is a standard. It is you finally treating your heart like it is valuable. It is you refusing to be someone's convenience. It is you refusing to be someone's emotional backup plan. It is you stepping into the truth that real love does not require you to keep proving you are worthy of respect. Real love meets you with respect because it recognizes your worth from the start. When your life becomes full again, they feel the shift from "I have you" to "I could lose you." And that shift doesn't happen because you're trying to prove something. It happens because you finally stop pausing your life for someone who kept pausing the relationship. And if you've been in that anxious, avoidant loop, you know how easy it is to shrink your world down to the size of their attention. You don't even mean to. It starts subtly. You keep your evenings open, just in case. You stop making plans because you're waiting for them to choose you. You delay joy because it feels wrong to laugh while you're not sure where you stand. You check your phone too often, you lose focus, you live in anticipation. And little by little, your life becomes a waiting room. So when your life becomes full again, it's not just a lifestyle change, it's a psychological shift. It's a spiritual shift. It's the moment you stop living like you need permission to be alive. It's the moment you stop giving your best energy to someone who gave you uncertainty. And that's why it changes the dynamic, because avoidant patterns feed on assumed access. They feed on the quiet belief that you'll still be there, that your love will keep circling, that your availability will remain open even when they pull away. And when your life becomes full again, that assumption breaks. A full life doesn't mean you're pretending you don't care. A full life means you're no longer making your happiness dependent on a text message. It means you return to your routine, your goals, your friends, your health, your faith, your work, your creativity. It means you build momentum that doesn't require their presence to exist. And momentum is powerful, because momentum is evidence. Evidence that you are not stuck. Evidence that you are not waiting. Evidence that you will be okay with or without them. And for someone who is avoidant, that can create a very specific emotional response, because the avoidant nervous system often stays calm when it feels control, and it becomes activated when control feels threatened. When your life was small, when your energy was parked outside their door, when your attention was always available, they could retreat without fear. They could go quiet and still feel you there in the background. They could take space and still feel the relationship was on hold rather than at risk. That's why they often don't chase when you chase. Because chasing tells them, I'm still here, I'm still invested, you still have access. But when your life becomes full, when you stop orbiting, you create a new reality. Access is no longer guaranteed, and you can feel the difference. You start responding instead of reacting. You stop dropping everything to reply. You stop explaining yourself to death. You stop trying to keep the emotional temperature perfect. You become less available, not as punishment, but as truth, because you have things to do. You have a life to live. And that energy is felt because people can sense when someone is no longer desperate to be chosen. People can sense when someone's joy is self-sourced, not borrowed. People can sense when someone's world is bigger than one relationship. This is where the avoidant starts to feel the shift from I have you to I could lose you. And this is important because for many avoidants, fear of engulfment is louder than fear of loss until loss becomes real. When you were closed, their fear said, it's too much. When you pursued, their fear said, I need space. But when you stop pursuing and your life expands, another fear rises, loss. Not always in a clean, mature way, but in a visceral way. They start wondering, are you moving on? Are you okay without them? Are you replacing them? And that fear can activate pursuit. Because pursuit is the nervous system trying to restore control, trying to restore access, trying to reduce uncertainty. But listen, the reason your full life creates this shift is not because you're doing a tactic, it's because you're removing the illusion that love is unlimited. You're removing the illusion that someone can treat you casually and still keep you. You're removing the illusion that you will always wait. And in that space, they may start to see what they were taking for granted. The steadiness you brought, the warmth you offered, the loyalty you gave even when it wasn't earned. Your absence from their emotional background creates contrast. It makes them feel the quiet gap where your energy used to be. A full life also changes how you see them. That's the part that truly matters. Because when your life is small, you can romanticize them. You can idealize the good moments. You can forget the pain. You can convince yourself the inconsistency is temporary. But when your life is full, you have perspective. You have support. You have joy. You have distractions that are actually healthy. You start noticing how you felt around them, how often you were anxious, how often you were uncertain, how often you were waiting, and you start asking better questions. Not, how do I get them to chase me, but do I even want to go back to a dynamic that made me feel small? This is why a full life is the most powerful attraction you can have, not because it manipulates someone, but because it protects you. It protects you from making them the center. It protects you from tolerating crumbs. It protects you from confusing chemistry with safety. It turns you into someone who is harder to control because you are no longer dependent, and dependency is what makes you vulnerable to inconsistency. Now, if they do start chasing when your life becomes full, you have to stay wise. Chasing is not the same as choosing. Chasing can be driven by fear of loss, not readiness for intimacy. Chasing can be driven by discomfort, not accountability. They may want access again because they feel you slipping, but access is not the goal. Love is. Consistency is. Repair is. So you don't get swept up in the intensity of their attention. You don't collapse into relief. You don't hand them your heart because they suddenly remembered it exists. You observe. You require. You watch whether their behavior changes over time, not whether their messages get passionate for a week. And whether they chase or not, your full life has already done its greatest work. It brought you back to yourself. It reminded you that love is not supposed to be a waiting room. It reminded you that your happiness is allowed to exist today, not after someone finally decides. It reminded you that you are not someone who sits on a shelf while another person figures out their feelings. You are a living, breathing person with a future that deserves momentum. So yes, when your life becomes full again, they feel the shift from I have you to I could lose you. But the biggest shift is inside you, from I hope they choose me to I choose me. And that is the kind of energy that changes everything, because it is not borrowed, it is built. When you become calm and emotionally self-contained, you stop feeding the push-pull cycle that kept them in control. And I need you to understand how powerful that is, because for so long you thought your power was in your words, your patience, your ability to explain your heart in the most careful way. You believed that if you could just communicate better, love harder, stay softer, stay available, then the relationship would finally become safe. But the push-pull cycle isn't broken by better explanations, it's broken by a different energy. The energy of someone who no longer panics in the face of distance, someone who no longer treats silence like an emergency, someone who can feel the ache and still stay anchored. The push-pull cycle survives on reactivity. They pull away, your nervous system flares. They go quiet, your mind races. They become vague, you become desperate for clarity. And then you do what you've always done. You reach, you chase, you try to fix, you try to soothe the disconnection. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Because your heart is wired to seek safety through connection. But every time you react, the cycle gets reinforced. Their withdrawal works because it creates space. Your pursuit works because it restores contact. Both nervous systems get a temporary relief, and temporary relief is addictive, even when it's destroying you. So when you become calm, truly calm, not the fake calm of swallowing everything until you explode later, but the real calm of emotional self-containment, the entire system changes. Because they pull away and you don't chase. They go quiet and you don't beg. They delay and you don't collapse. And suddenly the cycle has nothing to feed on, no panic to hook into, no emotional overflow to manage, no desperation to control. And I know that can sound like a strategy, but it's not a tactic, it's a healing. It's you becoming the kind of person who can hold their own feelings without needing someone else to rescue them from discomfort. Emotional self-containment is the moment you stop outsourcing your peace. It's the moment you stop handing someone else the remote control to your nervous system. It's the moment you stop living like a text message decides whether you're okay today. And that is not coldness, it is freedom. It is you learning that you can love someone and still not abandon yourself. You can miss someone and still keep your dignity. You can want closeness and still require consistency. You can feel the urge to reach out and still choose to breathe instead, to pause, to ask yourself, am I reaching because it's healthy, or am I reaching because I'm afraid? Because fear is often what fuels the chase. Fear of losing them, fear of being replaced, fear of being forgotten, fear that the silence means you weren't enough. And the avoidant dynamic is brutal because it keeps fear activated. It makes you read signs like survival. It makes you interpret delays like rejection. It makes you become hyper, aware of everything. But calm doesn't come from them behaving perfectly. Calm comes from you building an inner home that doesn't collapse when someone pulls away. Calm comes from you learning that uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it is not fatal. Silence is painful, but it is not proof of your worth. Someone's distance is information, but it is not a verdict on you. This is why your calm changes the power dynamic, because the old dynamic gave power to whoever could leave the room emotionally, whoever could withdraw without shaking, whoever could create uncertainty and still feel in control. And you may have felt like the powerless one, because your heart stayed open, because you felt deeply, because you cared. But the truth is, caring was never your weakness. The loss of self-containment was. The moment you stop spiraling, the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop needing their response to regulate your emotions, you take power away from withdrawal. You remove the reward. You remove the control. You remove the ability for silence to manipulate you. And I want you to know, calm is not the absence of feeling. Calm is the presence of self-leadership. Calm is you saying, I feel anxious right now, and I am still safe. Calm is you saying, I miss them, and I am still whole. Calm is you saying, I want to text, and I am going to wait, because my dignity matters more than my impulse. Calm is you holding your own heart the way you wanted them to hold it. That is emotional maturity, and emotional maturity is magnetic, not because it makes someone chase you, but because it makes you impossible to control with distance. When you become emotionally self-contained, you stop turning conversations into emotional rescue missions. You stop over-explaining your feelings to someone who keeps misunderstanding you on purpose. You stop proving your love like it's a court case. You stop negotiating for basic care. You start speaking clearly, briefly, firmly, and then you let action speak. You give people the dignity of their choices, and you give yourself the dignity of your boundaries. This is the part that feels unfamiliar, because you're used to being the one who keeps the connection alive. But you begin to understand something. If the connection can only survive when you overfunction, then the connection is not stable. It's dependent on your self-abandonment. Now, here's what will happen inside you as you learn this calm. You will have moments where your body protests. You will feel the urge to fix. You will feel the itch to chase. You will feel the anxiety rising like a wave, because your nervous system is used to calming itself through contact. And in those moments, you don't shame yourself. You don't call yourself weak. You treat yourself with tenderness, and you practice a new response. You ground yourself. You go for a walk. You breathe slowly. You write what you want to say, and you don't send it. You talk to someone safe. You return to your routines. You remind yourself, I am allowed to feel, and I am allowed to choose how I respond. This is where your heart becomes strong. Not hard strong. Strong enough to love without losing yourself. Strong enough to wait for consistency instead of chasing potential. Strong enough to stop confusing intensity with intimacy. Strong enough to let someone's silence be their silence, without turning it into your punishment. Because the old version of you believed, if I just love harder, they will stay. The new version of you understands, if they are meant to stay, they will show up without me having to bleed for it. And here's the quiet miracle of calm. It reveals who someone truly is. When you're reactive, you create noise that can distract from the truth. When you're constantly chasing, you keep resetting the relationship without repair. But when you're calm, when you stop feeding the cycle, you see what happens. Do they step up when there is no panic to manage? Do they communicate when they can't rely on your pursuit? Do they repair when they can't hide behind your forgiveness? Do they show consistency when they can't count on your availability? Your calm becomes a mirror, and mirrors are honest. So if you're learning to be calm and emotionally self-contained, don't do it to change them. Do it to save you. Do it so your nervous system can rest. Do it so your life stops revolving around unpredictability. Do it so you stop mistaking anxiety for love. Do it so you can finally feel what secure love feels like. Steady, clear, mutual, a love where you don't have to beg for presence, where you don't have to decode silence, where you don't have to perform peace while your heart is drowning, where your calm is not something you pretend, it is something you live, even on the days you miss them, even on the days you feel the pull, even on the days the phone stays quiet, and you still choose to stay loyal to yourself.